the usual things of welcome. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the fourth webinar on the postal history exhibiting organized by the FIP Postal History Commission. Now, just in case you missed the other seminars, they are all available on YouTube via the links posted on the Postal History Commission website or the FIP official website. Today's seminar will be, as usual, recorded, and you will find the same link on the Postal History Commission and the FIP sites made in a few days' time. Of course, all of you will be muted during the seminar, just to cut out all the extraneous noises from cell phones, your wife calling, or your neighbors, etc. And please use the chat function if you wish to ask any questions during the seminar. And I think we could actually do free discussions after the seminar is over. But before we start introducing today's speaker, Dr. Prakop, the FIP Vice President, would like to say a few words. Dr. Prakop?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. On behalf of the FIP Board of Directors, I would like to thank you all for joining this postal history seminar today. Thank you for Dr. Hendrik to conduct this seminar today. And thank you, Dr. Andrew, for conducting as an MC for this seminar, and Kelly Ong, the Secretary General, to hosting and facilitating this seminar. I do believe that all participants will enjoy the seminar and learn new tricks on how to get more points for your exhibit. Now, without further delay, I'd like to ask Dr. Andrew to officially introduce our speaker today. Thank you very much and enjoy the seminar. Thank you.
Today's speaker is none other than Professor Hendrik Morrison. If you attended the inaugural seminar, and you would have seen him, he's a brilliant lecturer, and I'm sure that you would really enjoy listening to his seminar. Well, Dr. Hendrik Morrison, of course, you know that he has a large gold medal in his postal history exhibit, and he's a professional lecturer, of course. And yes, I think without further ado, I think Hendrik is over to you.
Thank you very much. I will just share the screen here for a moment. Do you have the screen now visible?
Well, I can see you.
Can you see the screen, the presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, I can see it on my computer.
Okay.
Let me just try again, one moment.
Ah, yes. Okay. Oh.
Eh? That is very strange.
I guess you should switch off and on again so you can do it.
That's it. Yeah.
You see it now?
Yes.
Thank you. Now I think this should work now, right?
Yep.
Okay, so welcome everybody, whether it's morning, evening, or midday. I'm very happy to have been asked by the FIP Commission for Postal History on behalf of the Bureau to present today a talk on the importance of importance in postal history exhibits. And it is also going to focus quite a lot on this kind of question. So how important should be judged in postal history exhibits? Because I think it is no secret that if you talk with exhibitors about the evaluation criteria, usually importance is the one that they are least familiar with, and it is often misunderstood. And I also have the experience that if you discuss judging criteria among judges, this is also the criteria that can lead to most discussions about between judges. So let me try to make some clarity, at least how the different FIP bureaus who have tried to harmonize the guidelines for the future, they have now agreed on a formulation which should make it clearer to the exhibitors and judges how to judge importance. But what is importance? So first of all, it's basically what is importance? Well, in short, it's basically how important is the subject for the postal service of the world. So basically, the subjects illustrating the most important developments relevant to the postal service of the world are things like the intro. In Europe, we talk about 14, 15, 1600s, where mail, 1700s maybe, where mail systems got introduced and got organized in a regular fashion. Then, of course, we had the introduction of adhesives or stamps, and that, because that led to a lot of reduction in postal rates and also meant that a lot of normal people started using the post. Before that, the and very rich individuals. Now, the next major development in worldwide postal history was the introduction of UPU rates and regulations. That affected the whole world, so that's also among the most important subjects in postal history. Then you have mail handling during World War I and II. There were a lot of new inventions made during those wars in order to make sure that the post got to different parts. Very important to the whole development of post in the whole world. And if we take something much more modern, it would be something like the introduction of automated mail sorting in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where the post started to sort mail by a machine and put various devices on the covers to help do that. So basically, there are important postal history development throughout times, and basically, the more important it is considered. All right, let's try to look a little bit back in time, in history. So if we look back 20, 30 years, importance was basically only judged based on the title, not the exhibit. So that meant that an exhibit called something like the introduction of the world's first postage stamp, which was basically GB line engraved on cover, got 10 points, no matter how good or bad the exhibit was. An exhibit of modern material, which 30 years ago was anything that was not first issues, got 7 points or less, no matter how good it was. And an exhibit of a smaller country got 7 to 8 points or less, no matter how good it was. Guidelines, which are still valid, but which are likely going to be changed for all the different classes in the next time we can have an FIP Congress. It says that the importance of an exhibit will be gauged or judged in relation to the general postal history of the country, area, and subject shown, and to philately in general, or importance to see. it's important to notice that this formulation includes both how important the subject is relative to the philately of the whole world, but also to how important the particular exhibit is relative to the area or subject shown. This means that already now we need to evaluate two different aspects when we evaluate the subject and how important is the exhibit within the subject. Now, why is this important? Well, I mean, I should finish with the guidelines. Basically, in the new harmonized guidelines, it has been expressed the same way in all the major classes, and it's stated in this way, and this I think is a more clear formulation. The importance of an exhibit is determined in relation to the subject chosen and to the overall significance of that subject. That formulation already exists in the current postal stationery regulations. And with regards to the traditional regulations, I'm not entirely sure, but maybe Prakop knows more, whether they have actually been accepted or not by now. But I mean, the traditional philately class has exactly the same formulation, and the post formulation for its new harmonized guidelines that are still not accepted, but which is suggested to be accepted. The new harmonized guidelines add a little bit of explanation to this, and it says, in assessing the importance of the exhibit, consideration is given to how difficult is the selected area to collect, what is the significance of the material area, what is the significance of the selected area and the material shown relative to the national philately of the country, and what is the significance of the selected area and the material shown relative to world philately. And then there is a special addition for 2C, which is the historical and social exhibits. And there it says that half the points available importance to history, mankind, and or geographic area. Why is this a fair and good way to judge importance? The reason I have tried to illustrate with this graphics. So basically on the y-axis here, you have the ease with which 5 points can be achieved. And on the x-axis, you have whether important or whether the subject is very broad and very important. And basically, if the subject is very narrow, it's very easy to get the best exhibit within that area because the subject is very narrow. I can give you an example. You choose to show the postal history of a little village in any country. You will relatively quickly be able to have area. The downside is that there are 100,000 or 1 million different villages in all the countries of the world where you can do the same thing. So with those narrow subjects, it's important, it's easy to get the most important exhibit within the area, but the importance of the subject is low because it's very narrow. On the other end of the scale, you have very broad and very important subjects, such as the postal history of a whole country. For will be a lot more material to choose from, and there will be a lot more items that would be highly significant to many different subjects and to philately in general. And it will be much more difficult for a very broad area to get all the best items and to show all aspects of the story. So when you have an important subject, a broad subject, it's very difficult to get So therefore, there is this inverse relationship, we would say in science, between the two things. And the best exhibits, or the most important exhibits, are those that has all the best material and the best complete story about the broad subjects. That's the most difficult to achieve, is to get high points in both these aspects of importance. All right. Importance to be judged is that the importance of the area should be considered for approximately 50% of the points, and 50% would be 5 out of the 10. And the importance of the shown exhibit within its area should be given about 50% of the points, which would again be 5 out of 10. And these two aspects should be judged separately. One should not influence the other, too much at least. And let me give you an example of that. So it's very important that when you use this 5+5 point system, you must use the full scale from 1 to 5 in both areas. Because if you give at least 2 or 3 points for both, it doesn't matter, it doesn't work. And if you never give full marks, it also doesn't work. And I'll try to show that by a few examples. But before that, if you want to know how important an area is, and it's basically the broader the area, the more important it is. So the postal history of a whole country is usually more important than the postal history of a single city, town, or village, in that order. Likewise, a postal history exhibit dealing with all types of mail is more important than a single type of mail or service. Long time periods are usually more important than short time periods. So basically, there is one danger here. If you have a very long time period, you will get high score in the importance of the area, but if you choose it too long, you will lose points in treatment because the 8 frames are not enough space to show all aspects. Careful not making those time periods too long so that they don't fit in 8 frames anymore. But you would not lose the points in importance then, you would tend to lose them in treatment. So long periods tends to be very important, but if they are too long, they will lose points in treatments typically. All right. Other rules of thumb. Almost all countries can be important. That means that they can get two exceptions. Very small countries that existed for a very short amount of time, and especially those where 90 or 95% of the material was used philatelically, and therefore there's hardly any commercial mail from that stamp issuing body. That would probably be difficult to get 5 out of 5 for the area because so much is philatelic. But let me explain why almost any country, and that is because, for instance, a country's or big cities' postal history can be used to illustrate very important developments in worldwide postal history seen from that country's perspective. One example will be to use a country's postal history to illustrate the development of UPU in general, or to use a country's postal history to illustrate transatlantic Bremen, Hamburg, or Southampton. You could use the postal history of those towns to show general sea posts of the world, more or less, by using those material from those particular towns, because so much mail went through those towns. All right. Also, the more types of mail, rates, cancellations, and regulations can be shown in your exhibit, the more important. Now, deciding what is important, it will always be a matter of discussion. So I cannot make a table for that. I can only give some examples at the end of this presentation. But what I can make a suggestion for is a scale for how should we give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points for the relative importance of this exhibit within its area. And we have talked about that in the Bureau. And one suggestion is the following. 5 points should, for the importance of the exhibit within its subject, should probably be given to exhibits in the top 1 to 10% of exhibits that have ever existed within that subject. 4 points, probably to the top quarter, so something like the top 10 to 30% level of the exhibit relative to all exhibit that has existed in that area. A medium level exhibit, so basically middle of the road, an average level exhibit for that area, 3 points. The lower quarter, 2 points. And a beginner's exhibit at local level who have just started collecting that area would probably be what would get 1 point out of the 5 for the. This can be generalized across different exhibiting topics. Many exhibitors ask the following question: how can you improve your score in importance? And I'm afraid that among all the exhibiting categories or point categories, importance is the most difficult one to change. But I think you can do some overall significance of your exhibit so that you get to the 5 out of 5 for the significance of the exhibit within the area. That is something you have influence on. You can, of course, try to make the best ever exhibit within your topic. Then you will certainly get 5 out of 5 in that part of the evaluation. The other part, which is basically the area, the title, more or less, that is much more challenging, but I do think that if you use a more narrow area to tell a broader story, so you use the postal history of a single town to tell the postal history of the whole country, and it's clear in the exhibit that that is your goal, then that exhibit of a single town could get the importance points as if it was the whole country, if there's enough material from that town to show the postal history of the whole country. Likewise, you can use a single country to tell the postal history story of worldwide significance. So for instance, using German material to show the history, the introduction of the UPU and all its regulations and rates. Let me now give you some practical examples, because this may be very abstract, but let me try to give you some practical examples. Of the world's first postage stamp. That would basically be GB line engraved on cover. And if this is the best of the best, it has pre-first day usages, first day usages, big units on cover, rates to a lot of different destinations, a lot of different rates, a lot of different cancellations, then obviously that would get 10 for importance, because both the area will be extremely important, as it was the first time that postage stamps were introduced. Of the best, it would also get 5 within its area, and it would get 10 points as it did 30 years ago. It will still get 10 points today. The second example shows a little bit the difference between the 30 years ago way of evaluating importance and how it has developed, or how the bureaus have agreed it should develop. And that is that the title is exactly the same. So of course, 5. Now we have to look here what the content is. So in this case, the content is many simple 1 penny black, 1 penny red covers from many different towns, very little international mail. Key aspects of the story is not being told due to lack of material. So that would be very ordinary material. So it would only get to 1 to 2 out of the 5 within the area. And therefore, actually, you can importance because the importance of the exhibit is very low within its area. Let's see here. I don't know why I suddenly have some red things on my screen. Do you see those red lines? That's very strange. Anyway, I think we can still see what's on there. What if you, for instance, have the postal history of village XYZ from pre-philately to 1900s? Everything recorded from this specific village, but has almost no items that would be of interest to exhibitors of the general postal history of the country. In that case, the significance of the area is only 1 out of 5. However, because that's the best exhibit of that very narrow area, it gets 5 out of 5 for the importance of the exhibit within the area, and it ends up with 6 in importance. XYZ, again, same period, it would have almost everything recorded from that specific town and a few to some items of more general interest. Now the significance of the importance of the area is somewhat higher, 2 to 3 points, and it's still the best within that exhibits from that town, so it would still get 5 out of 5 for the area, and you would end up with 7 to 8 points in importance. Of the best, it's kind of in the middle with 20 to 50% of the best items, and now you would get 2 to 3 plus 3 would be 5 to 6 for the same title, but because the exhibit itself is less significant within the area, it would get less points for importance because it would lose points in the importance of the exhibit. The next example is the postal history of capital or it shows a nice variation of material from that city to tell the story about the post in the city, its post offices, cancellations, and postmasters. Very, very typical exhibits we see in postal history. And here, because the focus is still on that city only, it's not a broader scope, the importance of the area is 3 to 4, because it's a major city, because it shows a nice variation of material. That's my way of saying it's okay, but it's not the best of the best. It would get 3 to 4. And you can now see that this exhibit would end up somewhere between 6 and 8 points in importance. Now the next exhibit has exactly the same title. So you should think it should get exactly the same number of points in importance of the area. But this exhibit uses the chance, the only chance, to really what you would expect from the title. And in this case, the exhibit has a very significant proportion of the top items recorded used in that city, but it uses the material to illustrate the postal history of the whole country, or for instance, transatlantic mail. So now it's still post from that city, but it doesn't focus on the city. It focuses on a much more general topic, namely the postal history of can push the importance of the area up to 4 to 5. And because the exhibit would be a very good one within the area, you could also get 4 to 5 for the importance of the exhibit. And now you can actually reach 8 to 10 points in importance for that exhibit. The last example I would like to give before I go over to a general discussion is the usage of the 1901 overprint on cover. In that subject. This is probably only relevant for about half a year or a year. And it's also, the title is really a traditional one. It says the usage of a specific stamp on cover. And usually overprints are not so important in most cases for the general postal history of that country, because they usually run for a shorter period of time and is only used on very few different types of mail. So in this case, to 30%, but it has many philatelic items. And in this case, because the area is very narrow for postal history, 1 year or half a year is in most cases a very narrow topic. It only get 2 for the importance of the area. And depending on how good the exhibit is, if it's the top 20 to 30%, it might get 4 within the area, and it would end up with 5 to 6 points in importance. So you can see that with exhibits in almost any topic would win points in importance compared to how it was just judged 30 years ago. Whereas mediocre or not so good exhibits of very classical titled areas would get slightly fewer points than they would have gotten 30 years ago. I think that's the main effect of this development. So I would like to maybe a harbor city that focuses on the postal history of the whole country and or transatlantic mail. If I saw that title and would discuss with the exhibitor how the exhibitor could improve his or her exhibit, I would suggest to reflect this broader scope in the title. So for instance, that exhibit could be called The Postal History of Bremen Used to Demonstrate the Handling of Transatlantic the postal history of Bremen used to show the postal history of Germany or something like that. So you would already in the title show that you actually have a broader scope. With this, I would like to stop my monologue and thank you for your attention at this stage. And I would like now to open up to discussion a few more examples and see what do you actually think these type of get the discussion going, because I think this is an important discussion to have. And with this, I would like to ask Andrew or Kelly to open up for questions and to turn on the microphones of the questioner. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope we'll get a very fruitful discussion. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think the best thing is if you, any of the participants has any comments, could you unmute yourself, please? I think Graham Winters has something to say.
Yeah. You stressed the using all 1 to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each of the categories.
Yes.
Why don't we do that in presentation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? We don't use 1 and 2 at all.
I think that's a very good question. There has been a tradition that we feel we should encourage exhibiting, and we don't want to embarrass anybody who shows. So I have very rarely seen less than 50 points. And I think it is very important that if a first-time exhibitor comes to an exhibition, that they are not going home with a very bad feeling. So I think the honest reason for why we usually rarely give less than half the points in any of the criteria is to encourage exhibiting.
Yeah, I understand that. This system that you've outlined here, it's the system we've been using, certainly in British exhibiting, for a long while now, and it does work.
I agree. We have used it in Scandinavia as well for quite a while. And I also think that the Americans have used it for quite a while.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I may say something, that's my experience in Belgium and in Sindelfingen, where I judge, is that even if you have an exhibit, and I had it recently at the end of 2019 in Belgium, where you see, okay, this exhibit, the guy did an effort, but it's not good. I think regarding to what Graham says about the lower points giving, I think it's the most important is that not that you give lower points, which can be correct, but I think the most important is that you take the time to explain it to the exhibitor why he does have this, let's say, lower points and how he can improve it. I think that's most important, because many times you and I know it's difficult. You get a judge, a meeting with the judges, and they take just 2 to 3 minutes, and that's it, with a kind of a baloney explanation why the figure is so low, instead of taking 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes to explain to the exhibitor where he took the wrong road, to, let's say it that way, and how he could improve, because I think that's the only way we can keep the exhibitors on board. And otherwise they're going to be disillusioned and they say, look, forget it, I don't exhibit anymore. And that's the pity of it. I think as judges, we should go the extra mile and take the time to explain the figure, how they can improve it, even help them to improve it. I do it all the time, and I keep people on board. But I think it should be done much more. That's my opinion about it.
I couldn't agree more. I think the feedback to the exhibitors after we have given the points is probably even more important than giving the right number of points. My experience is, even if you have given a number of points that the exhibitor is not very happy with, if you afterwards give a highly qualified feedback and very concrete one that the exhibitor can use and go home and make it better, they are going to forget the point score that was too low a lot faster than if you give either no feedback or bad feedback. So I think that one of the things that at this new, in the FIP level, there is now this judging seminar that many of us has taken part in, and a very important part of those seminars was to teach judges to give good feedback. And I fully agree that less than 10 minutes is not good. And we never have less than 10 minutes per exhibitor in Scandinavia since years.
Nationals in this country.
So I fully agree with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's Jane speaking from Eastern Canada, but I've judged. I'm a judge in both the U.S. and Canada. I move a lot, and we've moved to a system. It depends on the show, where sometimes we don't have a lot of opportunity in the feedback forum, as we call it here, and it's everybody meet at the frames. That one thing I like both. I find that the feedback forum gives opportunities to say general things that perhaps apply to all the exhibitors. And also sometimes gives an opportunity to not compare exhibitors, but to say, you know, if you're want to see a good treatment, then look at this exhibit. And then at the frames, of course, we get the, you know, the one-on-one. And one thing that they've done more recently here is to post a list of who the first responders are on the frames after the judging is completed. And that way, sort of, there's a two-way street in terms of the exhibitor seeking out the judge, or the judge seeking out the exhibitor, which is nice. I do remember one of the very first times I judged, I was doing my forum, and I was being quite detailed in the information that I was giving on my written form. And I had an older judge say to me, "Oh no, you don't do that. Just one or two words, just a little bit. You don't need to say anything." And I've never listened to that. I've always taken the time and made quite detailed comments. And with this feedback at the frames, some judges are saying you can just say, "Oh, I spoke to you at the frames." Well, if you've been at a show for 3 days and you've done lots of things, you're tired. Some people take notes when you're speaking to them at the frames, some don't. You don't remember all the things that were the things that were said to you at the frames. So I tend to still write out my comments very carefully. Anyway, that's just my view on how I do it. And I really enjoyed your table about the practical examples. And if I could get a copy of the slideshow, that would be quite useful to explain to some of the judges here who judge fairly infrequently.
I'll be happy to do that. We will also post this on YouTube, and there's a few more examples on the next slides, actually.
Okay, thank you.
So everybody can see it on YouTube, but I'm happy to send you the slides as well. Just send me an email so I don't forget.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I comment on Jane, please? Because Jane said about the detailed comment, I have the feeling, that's my experience, that when you give the exhibitor a very, let's say, detailed comment, he is more willing to go along with you, because you give him the impression that you took the time to really look at this exhibit, to analyze it, and to make the best judgment ever. So I think what Jane is doing, I think that should be kind of a standard within FIP, as far as that is possible, because giving comment and giving notes on it, it's like the 2 words she said of her older colleague. I mean, if you try to explain to children in a classroom, you don't do it with 2 words. You give a very detailed explanation to the kids, and exhibitors, or in fact, we are all exhibitors. It are just like kids. They just need enough explication why something is good, why something can be improved, and so on. So I think we should take really some notice on it, that we, let's say, comfort the exhibitor and give him all the information that he needs, and not giving him the impression that we just want to rush on to the next exhibitor and so on.
Yeah, can I comment on that, because it's very close
Yes,
to
please.
my heart. It's
Please.
very close to my heart as well. And the only exhibition where I have been responsible was a bilateral Danish-German exhibition in Oldenburg a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And we had enough sponsorship that we could pay the judges for staying 1 more day than normally. And what we did with that day was that this was on Saturday. So, and the Palmares was on Saturday evening, and the feedback was on Sunday. But we were done with judging on Friday. On Saturday, I gave this presentation about importance, because that is usually the one where there's most discussion. I also gave a separate presentation of how to give good feedback from a psychologist and human behaviorist perspective. And then we had role plays, which I did together with Lars Engelbrecht in the room, where one of us played the exhibitor and one played the judge. And we did these role plays in front of the jurors, and we had agreed before to make a bad one and a good one. And then we tried to act how an exhibitor will react to that. After that, so that took about 1.5 hours in the morning. And after that, we sent the teams down to the exhibits, and they went through all the exhibits with 15 minutes available per exhibit to prepare the feedback. So there was a first responder, and that person had 10 minutes to prepare that, and then 5 minutes to make a trial feedback to the other 2 judges. And we did that for all the exhibits. Now, that I think worked well. There were some that were more skeptical to this than others, but I think it worked. And the problem is, however, it costs 1 more day. So it's additional cost to the jury. And I'm aware that at international exhibitions, the cost of having the jury 1 more day is very high. So it's a question of how much the exhibitors are willing to pay for getting good feedback, because unless you have a very good sponsor, you need more money to keep the jury 1 more day. But I think if you have that, you can do a lot to improve the feedback by actually making sure that it's part of the jury work to prepare that feedback.
I agree.
Yeah. Henrik.
Can I just add something?
Oh, sorry. Go on, Chris.
I think Chris wanted to say something.
Just, yeah, I was actually, I was at the Oldenburg show. And one of the big advantages at the Oldenburg show was that most of the exhibitors were there. And one of the big disadvantages at big FIP shows is not only does it cost more money really than is realistic to add a day, but a lot of the exhibitors are not there. So what you're saying is filtered back to the exhibitor via the commissioner. And this, I have to say, does not work very well in my experience. And so the challenge for the FIP at these very large shows is to square that particular circle. I'll say no more. It's a very, very difficult problem to resolve.
I judged at a show in Ottawa a few years ago, and one of the exhibitors wasn't able to be there. And because of my schedule, I was able to have a phone call with him after the show and speak to him about the exhibit. Now I realize that in larger situations, people don't always have the time to do that. But I wonder, with this new technology that we have now, that we're all making more use of, if it's an opportunity to be able to do that.
Right.
Move on.
I think when it comes to this with feedback after the exhibition, so I'm still relatively young and I work 60 to 80 hours a week. So I am one of the ones who would refuse if that is an obligation. That doesn't mean that I have not done it on a number of occasions, but I think it is dangerous to make that an obligation, because people who have a normal work schedule, they cannot commit to doing that with 20 or 30 exhibitors afterwards. I don't mind doing it with 1, 2, 3, but I cannot, if I would have to do it, I would basically commit to do it with 20, 30 exhibitors, and that I think is unrealistic.
Henrik, before we go on to question time, I think you want to continue your seminar.
No, I mean, it's okay. I mean, if that's what people, I think it's a very important subject. If people want to discuss that, that's fine.
Yeah, in chat, which I would like, to ask you, but I think
yes, let's do that.
Seminar before we do that, shall we?
Yeah. We can do these questions in the chat now. I just posted here, in case there was no questions, kind of some exhibits, some examples where we could try to give the points, but I can tell you on the next slide, I have my suggestion for the points. So, and the next one, I have also some that you can discuss. And this is just to know, to give the people who see this presentation some opportunities to think and discuss what to give to different types of exhibits. And I think that exercise can be used in judging a training in the national federations, because I think the more examples like that we discuss among ourselves, the more consistency we can reach eventually. So I think, Andrew, just continue with the questions from the chat, please.
Okay, right, I've got a question from Fernando Prato. He said, I have a 2C exhibit about the 3 German companies tried at Nuremberg for war crimes. Most of the pieces are from Germany, but also from occupied areas and other countries where these companies had subsidiaries. The effects of Nuremberg trials were global. So how do you compare the importance of an event like that to other historic events? Are the Nuremberg trials more important than a certain city event? Are the trials considered as a German thing, or it has broader importance? So I believe that so far is the only postal history exhibit on the subject of this matter.
Yeah, it is quite difficult to say that offhand. I would have to see the approach in that exhibit to tell you how important I think the subject was, because this is a very specialized subject that at the first instance is very narrow, but historical significance of Nuremberg trials is high. So it, depending on the approach that this exhibit takes, I think it could be anywhere between 2 and 5, but that basically depends on the approach, because it's very difficult, especially with 2C, to imagine how the exhibit is what the scope, how the approach in the exhibit is. So I think that one is very difficult to say something about if I do not have the exhibit and the title page in front of me.
Yes. Fernando actually has, as an answer to Chris' a question about the absence of physical absence of exhibitors at the feedback. He said that nowadays any cell phone can record short videos, so the commissioners can record the feedback to share with the exhibitors if they couldn't travel. That's his comments rather than question. Okay, so I've got a question from Nick Amor. Do the same rules of importance apply to a one-frame entry? If not, how do they vary?
In the old regulations, or the current regulations as they are now, yes, importance is exactly the same in one frame. In the new harmonized guidelines, that's going to change, because their importance has been replaced by how well the topic fits into one frame. So then it would be very different, because actually in one frame exhibits with extremely few exceptions, by definition, the subject has to be very narrow, and therefore giving importance point for something that needs to be narrow in order to fit into one frame has given a lot of problem in judging and a lot of inconsistency in judging. So in the Bureau, we have discussed that it makes more sense to judge in one frame exhibit specifically. It makes more sense to judge not the importance of the subject, but for half the point, but how well does the subject fit into the one frame limitation? And then the other 5 points for the quality of the exhibit within its subject. But so at the moment, the answer is it's exactly the same. If the new harmonized guidelines get accepted, then it would be different.
Okay. Yes.
Henrik, can I ask a different question?
Yeah, who's talking?
It's Frank Walton, sorry.
Hi, Frank.
A few years ago, I did manage to get to 95 marks for a display from a small African country. Now, I got 95 out of 100. Well, I didn't really. I got 95 out of 98 because it was never possible to get more than 8 marks for importance. So I actually retired that exhibit on the grounds 95 was a very good score for that exhibit, and I decided I could never possibly go any further. So that has now been retired. So, in fact, it's been sold, so I can't do it again. But the point is that are we now to really get greater hope that it is possible for many more exhibits to go beyond 95? What do you think?
Frank, I certainly think that this way of judging importance is an advantage for very good exhibits of areas that in the past were very heavily limited by the importance score. So that I think, because it's very easy. I mean, your exhibit was, if you got 95 for some, as you say, small African country, then obviously the exhibit was the best ever from that place. And that means that you will get 5 out of 5 for the exhibit within its area. And if you used to get 8 out of 10 when they only judged the title, now you would get 4 out of 5, right? If you take the same percentage, and that's 1 point more. And at the 95, 96, that kind of level, 1 point means a big thing. So I think the answer is yes.
So can I change something again slightly? With all the uncertainties of the world at the moment, I'd really welcome the FIP having a congress remotely to actually clear the backlog of many, many different changes to the rules. Is that something the FIP could look at?
I'm not the right person to answer that question.
I know.
Is Jakob still here? He may have an opinion about that.
I think Dr. Prakop is probably the best person to answer that.
Yeah.
Well, personally, I'm not authorized to say yes or no because this will be under the discussion of the board. And as all we know that we are facing with the pandemic, which nobody knows when it's going to end for sure, maybe sometime next year. So the fifth board has been discussing on this. If it goes on like this year, there's no exhibition available or possible. If it happens next year too, what can we do? Because if you look at the current statutes and the regulations that we had, unfortunately, when we had those regulations, there is no foreseen into the future that something like this will happen. So most of the important decision to be made must be made in a person. And to change that, we need the Congress to approve it. We can propose to the Congress. And if the Congress agree, then definitely in the future we can do that.
Okay. I understand.
But we need to consult the so-called legal consultant too. If this go on, can we somehow do it by some other methods before we can have a physical Congress? So we are just...
I understand the difficulties. I know my own interest is in digital literature. And at the moment, we are really struggling with the fact that the FIP guidelines, or rules rather, don't really cover it. And trying to run shows in the future without any guidelines at all is very difficult. And we were really very much looking forward to the Congress has just been cancelled to actually put in place a set of rules. And it could be another year, 2 years before we get the rules.
Yes. I imagine the board, Prakop, is managing to meet by Zoom.
Yes, for the board ourselves, yes, we did that. But if you notice, those decisions that we discussed and among the board members, are those that does not categorized as the so-called official or important decisions. Just the general discussion that, okay, once we can have the physical meeting, this is the thing that we will propose to the Congress or to whatever to be done. So we just
understood. Very difficult.
yes.
We had to have the Royals annual meeting physically, because that's what the rules are. So I understand the difficulty.
Thank you. But I will relay to the board of your concerns and suggestions, and then we will see what we can do. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. I've got a question here from Thomas Höfner. He's going to ask a question about a Markophaly exhibit. He says, how about postmarks? What is their significance in relation to the worldwide postal services? Does it make a difference if any exhibit is about old ones or the modern ones?
I don't think so necessarily. I mean, again, the broader the subject is and the more broad significance those postmarks have, the higher the importance of the postmark exhibit would be. I think it's the same as with rates or routes or whatever. The more important those postmarks that are studied are to the philately of the country or philately in general, the more important the area is within Markophaly. And there are modern postmarks that play a very significant role in how post is exchanged between different countries, between, within a country and so on. So I think it's basically the same. And again, how the exhibit does within the area is exactly the same, of course.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Okay.
I wanted to say something to that. It's Thomas here.
Yeah, we hear you.
Hendrik, this is about comparing a postmark exhibit, for instance, against a transatlantic mail exhibit. And my feeling is that we struggle to give the postmark exhibits a certain level of points, while we are always impressed with transatlantic mail and other similar themes. So my question is just, are they really in different categories?
No, I mean, Thomas, I think if the exhibit focuses only on postmarks and doesn't use those postmarks to tell a broader story, then I think it is appropriate that it doesn't get so high points in importance of the area, because postmarks is one aspect of postal history. There are rates, routes, regulations, and so on. So the more that postmark exhibit would use those postmarks to tell a broader story, the higher I could see that postmark exhibit getting in importance. So for instance, if you would talk about transatlantic mail in the era where there were postmarks on those covers, then of course, if a postmark exhibit was called the transit marks for transatlantic mail of the world, for instance, and it just ordered it by postmark, but used that not only to tell the postmark story, but used it also to tell the story about transatlantic mail, then I do think that could be important. But if it's very, very narrowly focused only on the postmarks without looking left and right, then I think it is correct that the importance of the area for a postmark exhibit that only focuses on that would be less than one with a broader scope.
Yeah, okay, understood.
Okay. I've got a question from PC Shaw. He says, how would we differentiate importance within a subject area and treatment?
Oh, I think that's quite easy. I mean, so let me give you an example. I try to give you the example with a very long time period. In the treatment importance, that's how important the area is and how important it is within the area, the material is within the area. Treatment is about how the structure is, whether all aspects of the story is properly covered. So for instance, if you would have a very broad title, very long period, German postal history, 1840 to 1940, that would obviously be a very important area, but it would be impossible to show that properly and all aspects of that subject in 8 frames. So such an exhibit would score high, relatively high in importance. And if there would be, it can still be one of the best exhibits with that title, but it would have problems in treatment because it wouldn't cover all aspects relevant to the subject. So I do think there is a clear difference between the two.
Okay. You want to give us the answers for the second your quiz?
I mean, these ones were actually open to whatever people would think. I didn't have a specific answer to these ones, but I mean, if you have something like GB parcel mail to foreign destinations from UPU to World War I, then a GB parcel mail to foreign destinations it's a big country, a big period of time from UPU to World War I, but it's only one type of mail. So it certainly couldn't get 5 because it only looks at parcel mail. And if it's a medium exhibit, it would score 3 in importance of the exhibit. And it would probably score 3 or 4 because it's a broad area, but it's only one type of mail in the importance of the area. We take the next one, Norwegian mail to foreign destinations in the Skilling period. The whole Skilling period is a long period. It's an important period in Norwegian philately, but it would only focus on foreign mail. So the domestic mail is not included. So whether that's 4 or 5, and among the 5 best exhibit ever shown, so it would get 5 in importance of the exhibit itself, because there has been many exhibits of that topic. Swedish pre-philatelic covers sent to France and England. Obviously, that is narrowed. That subject is narrowed a lot by looking only at 2 countries. An exhibit that would look at foreign mail to all countries would be more important than one looking at only to France and England. And the last one, postal history of Oldenburg, that again would be the postal history of a reasonably big town, but with no significance in world postal history because it's not a major port or anything like that. So that will probably get between 2 and 3 for the area. And then depending on how good the exhibit is, it would get its point in the other category. So that's my comments to these ones. They are there to show that if you limited your either to a specific type of mail or only to mail between specific countries, that's of course less important than if you include everything. That was the point.
Okay. Andrea Mori has a comment. Says, I don't understand one thing about importance within the subject. If a new exhibit comes about the same subject of mine, but better, mine loses importance?
If it's only one exhibit, maybe not. But I mean, of course, things develop over time. So yes, if there are suddenly another exhibit that has much more material from your area, which shows that you didn't act, you weren't the best in that area, that is going to affect that, sure. But I mean, with very well-known topics, people usually know what exists in the past. So that would have been the case before as well.
Yeah, it's me. I made the question. May I comment on that? May I comment on your answer?
Sure.
I suddenly I don't hear anything anymore. Anyway, I think that that makes sense. What you say makes sense for important exhibits of important collectors. But what about average collectors, which have exhibits of which there are many instances? This happens in national exhibits, in national.
So give me an example. Give me a concrete example of like a typical title.
I don't know, like use of. I'm an Italian juror, so I have an experience in Italian about Italian exhibits. Let's say about something around World War I, of which there are dozens of exhibits about that.
Yeah, then if I should give importance, if it's only, let's say, a censorship mail from one particular part of the area that was involved in that war, which you see a lot of, right? And then if you see that all the mail in that is basically postage-free postcards and letters sent back to family or to the soldier, then the breadth of material that is inside that exhibit is quite limited. It's limited to a few types of mail. All the items are very similar, except for which censorship mark is on there. So in Markophily, it's quite, with the censorship marks, it's quite diverse, but on the level of rates, type of mail, such things, it's quite narrow. And also, if you look at, if it's not the whole area involved in that war, but only a very specific one, which you often see, that's of course also reducing the amount, the scores in importance. In those very narrow subjects, I tend to be very kind in evaluating the significance of the exhibit within that narrow area, because very rarely there's more than one or two exhibits in that very narrow specialization. So there you can be a little bit generous, I think. I think that is not a problem, because in the importance of the area, those exhibits will not score very high. Was that? I don't think I was very clear, because I can see on your facial expression that you don't think that was a clear answer.
No, I'm not fully convinced of this fact that an exhibit should be judged in relation with other exhibits. This is something that maybe a collector would not very happily accept.
Well,
I'm talking about
all the time.
Listen, I'm not talking about the best collectors around and the best collections around. I'm talking about the average collector.
Yeah, but I think if you would explain to them why you have given the 7 points or whatever you have given, based on this kind of argumentation, most exhibitors, at least in Denmark, has better understood why they got the points they got. It doesn't mean they all agree with it. I mean, there are certainly...
Oh, they never agree.
I mean, there are certainly exhibitors who says, my exhibit is the best ever of this very narrow area, and it's very rare and very important to me. So
I know what you're talking about.
10 points.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I hear that regularly, right? But I mean, I can only say that's not how it is judged. And then you can like it or not. But I mean, that is a fact. And at least I have the feeling that with this way of explaining, I have reached more exhibitors than before, where kind of importance to many exhibitors was kind of a unknown quantity. So I think it's very important to try to put words on what importance is. You will not reach everybody, but you will reach more people, I think.
Maybe.
It's worth trying, at least.
All right. Thanks.
If I may comment on that, because I agree with Henrik, and I think it's also important that, like the presentation we had this afternoon, which was extremely interesting for us as judges. But I think maybe it's an idea that we have to organize it also for exhibitors, because if an exhibitor sees this presentation, then he will understand, in my opinion, much more about importance and how it works, and it will be much easier to accept the points he is receiving, because my experience is that importance and treatment, it's for a lot of exhibitors a little bit foggy, especially importance. That's the most foggiest thing on the whole judging sheet. And I think we have to step also to the exhibitors, maybe going via the national commissioners of each country, that they organize it for their exhibitors. But in most of the cases, my experience is just a case of understanding or not understanding. And I think we need to help exhibitors to understand what do we mean with importance and how it's been judged, how we look at it. And then they will understand, because otherwise we are ending up with let's say the system like our colleague Andrea Mori says, that he is not totally convinced. But in the first place, I think we have to convince the exhibitors. They have to understand how it works. And that's, in my opinion, the only way that in the long run, it started to work. That's
and I would
what I
like
want
to
to say.
comment on that, Paul, and that is that all those seminars that we have made now, these webinars,
yeah,
we have put all of them on YouTube. And so that means that you can, if you like to point an exhibitor to this and you think it would help them, it's very, very easy to give them a link, and it's available at any time of day, anywhere in the world. And I can say that the first presentations we made here, which we put on YouTube first, I think it has more than 800 or 900 views in less than a month. So I do think that it does reach a substantial number of exhibitors. Whether it helps them or not is, of course, their decision. But
okay, fine, it's good.
Well, of course, there is a language problem because not everyone speaks English. But just for that, I'm planning to make some sort of not really a translation, but a survey of all these webinars we're having here for the Italian collectors, and publishing it in our national journal.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, if I can fit it in my schedule, that's the main problem, actually.
Any other questions? Well, yes, it seems that all of us are happy with Henrik's presentation. I personally am very happy that Henrik has presented something on a very challenging subject, which there's a lot of importance used to be judged very subjectively. You know, one judge would say, you know, this is a fantastic exhibit and should get 10 out of 10. But now we have actually some objective ways of judging importance, I think, which is very helpful to distinguish between the very best and the second level or third level. So for that, I'd like to thank Henrik, you know, for his time. You know, obviously I've never seen this presentation before. I think he's done very well on a very sensitive subject like importance. And thank you, Henrik, for doing that. And then also, of course, the FIP Secretary, Kelly, and Dr. Prakop for supporting us, and of course, all the participants. Well, we are coming to the last of the seminar on the 18th of October on a very important subject called knowledge. which I think everybody who exhibit postal history has. So anyway, I look forward to seeing you then. And from me, it's goodbye, and have a nice morning, afternoon, evening, and I'll see you very soon. Okay, thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you very, very much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.